So I want to give one more example here as far as why you want to charge more money for your services, for your installations as well, but we're just dealing with service primarily here. And you can see this is just a typical day. This was actually just a day that I picked out the schedule. These are the service calls that we ran with the total invoice totals, then broke them down to find out what the gross profit margin was. And you can see we did 11 calls I have over here, and the total was 2802. Now the average gross profit margin was 71%, which that's great because that's what I wanted to hit ultimately. If I'm using 50% for my overhead and I wanted to earn 20% net profit, that would cover it. The thing about it is that you'll see on here, sometimes I went way over. Sometimes we made, here, this one we made 88%. Well, that's, if my overhead's 50%, then I just made 38% net profit. Excellent, right? The thing is if I can always get that, no problem. We need to get as much as we can while the work's there. But the main reason that I want to get that much for some other tickets, and when we run overtime service as well, I got an overtime example right here, is $445, and that was after hours. So we charged $195 just to come out, and then we charged the repair rates at an overtime fee for replacing a contactor, and we also cleaned the system up. But basically I had $445 minus $12 for a contactor minus $28 for labor, and whatever that amount was, and I divided it by 445, and I came up with 91%. So that's really good. We made a lot of money on that particular call. But you can see, if you're providing good service, you're going to have some calls where you just don't charge, where you went out and you didn't charge anything. And that's why, if we get more, don't ever be afraid to shoot over that 30% divisor. If we've got 50% overhead, as an example, and we want 20% net profit, that's 70. So 100 minus 70 is a 30% divisor. Don't be afraid to do a 25% divisor or a 20% divisor, because and that's why I would shoot for that initially, not counting the diagnostic fee. So if you count that 30% divisor, that does not include the diagnostic fee, because the diagnostic fee is just kind of the icing on the cake. And we need the icing on the cake, because if we don't, we wind up hurting ourselves, because when you provide good service, you're going to wind up giving some calls away for free. You just don't charge people every time for every single thing that you do. So for instance, we had a zero, of course some of these are smaller numbers, like this 72%, that was only 72% of a $65 service call. Now, I'm not sure why it's 65. We probably didn't charge and I didn't dig deep into it, so I'm not 100% sure. But when you look at these, you can see we don't, the 72s, that's what we were kind of aiming for, but that included a diagnostic fee. So that means we didn't come out as good as we would have liked to have on those service calls. But thankfully, we had other service calls that hit way above that to offset our average. So that's another reason, is if we just always are aiming just for the 70%, you're going to have 2 or 3 service calls a week that just don't go the way you wanted them to go, so they took longer than what you bid them for, or you give Mrs. Smith something extra because she's been a good customer for years, or you go run a warranty service call, and that's what this was a warranty service call. Well, that is service. We did go do service for $0. I'm gonna throw that in there to get a more realistic picture of what our average gross profit margin is. So when you do that, you can see it takes some of these bigger ones where we actually made really good money on the service call to offset zeros, and to offset ones where we didn't quite, like here we got a 60% one, and it was only a $95 service call. Now 60, we still made 10% off of it, but it should have been more. For whatever reason, we didn't sell enough, or you know, couldn't convince Bob here. These numbers are real. The names are fictitious. So, but on this service call for Bob, we hit 76. On this one for Bob, we hit 60%. It's one of those things that if we don't go a little bigger on, you know, what we're shooting for, you put a 0 in there and it really screws up your averages, and then all of a sudden you're just not making money. So for all of this, you can see we did $2,800 in service that day, which is a really good service day, and we averaged 71%, so we were golden. You know, if our overhead's 50%, which ours currently is at the time of doing this video, we just made 21% today. Well, 21% at 2,800, I'll take that. You know, I'm really happy with that. There are companies doing a lot more than that and profiting a lot more. When it comes to your prices, you can typically always go up, but there is going to be a peak somewhere to where, you know, the customers, you got to be able to provide the value to equal the price. So there can be a peak, but chances are, if you bought this video series, you are not there. You can go higher. So please, once again, don't be afraid to raise your rates. This is critical. This is something that takes you from failure to success. So I want to just hammer that home one more time. This particular service call is 76 for this Bob. Once again, 75. And I'm just minusing what that particular tech who did that service call, that's what he makes. That gave me 57. We didn't use any material because it was just a diagnostic. I think we just, you know, put the door on better, or flip the switch back on, or reset a breaker. Probably didn't reset a breaker because we would have checked it a lot further, but the bottom line is it was just a diagnostic fee for whatever reason. I take the 75 minus what the tech made, divide it by the invoice price again, make 76% gross margin. So that's the thing. You want to get as much as you can because you're going to have some 0 tickets thrown into the mix, and when that happens, it screws your averages up, and overall you start losing money. And so don't be afraid to charge more.